Mr. Samit Vartak is a CFA charter holder, has worked closely with various companies in the US and India, advising them on business strategy, profit optimization, growth, and valuation. He returned to India in 2006 after spending a decade in USA, working initially in corporate strategy with Gap Incorporated and PwC Consulting, and then with Deloitte and Ernst & Young, advising companies on business valuations and M&A. We have with us our next eminent panelist, Mr. Sunil Singhania, founder of Abacus Asset Management. Now, he founded Abacus Asset Management, an India-focused asset management company, in 2018. Mr. Sunil Singhania has over 2 decades of experience in Indian equity, and as ex-CIO at Reliance Mutual Fund, he oversaw around $11 billion of equity assets. We have with us Mr. Rajesh Kothari. He's the founder and managing director of Alpha Accurate Advisors. He's the visionary behind the customer-driven and excellence-based approach, and a CWA and an MBA by qualification. He has a rich experience of more than 20 years in the Indian capital markets and has handled several investment projects in premier investment institutions. We also have on the panel Mr. Rahul Rathi, Chairman and Fund Manager at Purnartha Investment Advisors, Purnartha Private Limited. He has over 20 years of investment and risk management experience gained from working with global financial institutions in New York, London, and Asia. Now, these panelists, ladies and gentlemen, very, very eminent panelists, will discuss building winning equity portfolio aimed at 10x returns over the next 10 years. And the session, as I said earlier, will be moderated by Mr. Kamal Manocha, who is an enthusiastic teammate at PMS AIF World with the aim and purpose of serving clients with most knowledgeable approach to investing by practicing his skills in the areas of his interests like investments, education, and content writing. He is honors in economics, MBA in finance, and carries many investment certifications and holds vast experience of more than 15 years in the field of investments. Mr. Kamal Manocha, so delighted to have you back now moderating this session. It's over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya, for such a beautiful beginning and such an elaborate description about each and every speaker. I can tell you, I have had an opportunity of having done webinars with each and every speaker we have today. But this is a fortunate moment for me because we have all 4 of them together. So it's always difficult to catch all 4 of them for an individual webinar. But having caught them together, it's absolutely a pleasure. And the topic in itself is one of the most important real questions which any investor and every investor has in its mind at every point of time, because everybody wants to build wealth. To grow a portfolio at 10x kind of a multiple is something which every investor aspires to do. So 10x return in mathematical equation means making around 25% to 26% CAGR. We have heard many stock stories, over last decade, over last 2 decades, maybe within Nifty, maybe within small and mid cap, which have given 10x kind of returns, or even more than that, or maybe 50x kind of returns also. But attaining a 10x return at a portfolio level is what the magic is all about, because none of the investor has a courage to put everything in one company, and everybody wants to create a portfolio. So creating a portfolio, building a portfolio for 10x returns over 10 years is very, very important. And in this session, we are going to talk about various factors which are responsible and which are important for an investor to actually start the journey and be on that journey to attain this goal of 10x returns in 10 years. So I would first of all like to ask, a question from Rahul. Rahul's philosophy has an history of having given much more than 10x returns over last 10 years, the CAGR of more than 40%, if I quote a conservative figure. However, his philosophy has lots of swings because it is a concentrated philosophy, right? It's like, a philosophy which has only 5 to 6 stocks, and building a portfolio of 5 to 6 stocks requires a very high conviction, a very high courage. Earlier, he used to, do that in an investment advisory setup, but now recently he has started a portfolio management service where minimum ticket size being 50 lakhs. So putting 50 lakhs into 5 to 6 companies, I'm trying to put myself in investors' shoe and trying to moderate this session in a very real manner So from investors' perspective, putting 50 lakhs into 5 to 6 companies is a very, very difficult task. It requires a lot of conviction. And hence, this question from Rahul, what are the various factors that you identify or you look in a business that give you so much conviction to, invest 15 to 20% into a single business? Over to you, Rahul.
Right. So let me answer that in my thinking when I decided to build a concentrated portfolio. So the first thought was that the philosophy of compounding, which really translates into time in the market versus timing the market. So 26% compounded over 10 years is 10x, but 26% compounded over 7 years is 5x. So if I miss out on 3 years, which doubles every 3 years, that means that I've lost at least half of the returns. So the first objective was to find out a portfolio that I can continue to hold for 10 years. And if I don't hold it for 10 years, I don't even achieve those returns. So the two principles or variables that I thought about while building a portfolio which can last over 10 years, which means which can last external as well as internal shocks, there were two parameters that were critical. And one parameter was 10% volume growth. Volume growth means that the company's products or services are relevant to the customer at the margin. So I have historical customers who believe me, who have seen me, and are willing to invest with me. But every new customer that I gain looks at all the alternatives and then decides me. So I'm still relevant to the customer at the margin. And if I have 10% volume growth, which also tells me that I'm relevant to a larger segment of customers, and debt-free, which means that customers are paying for my capex and working capital. These two principles, if I continue to build a portfolio on these two principles, they allow me to become concentrated, because not many companies can follow this particular formula. There are companies that can follow this for a few years. There are some companies that can follow this for a longer period of time. But to identify companies that can do this for 10 years was critical for my style of thinking. The last part, Kamal, was that the idea of going wrong. So let's see that if I went wrong, what could be the cost? Because one of the biggest challenges for most people, and me included, is what happens if I go wrong. And when I did the maths for going wrong, what I realized that when I look at a 26% return or 10% volume growth, I want to choose companies that are going to grow much faster than 10%. 10% is the average for the portfolio. There's some companies that might grow at 20%, some companies might grow at 5%. But let's say if I go wrong, so out of 50% of the portfolio I do right, and 50% of the portfolio I go wrong. So that 50% of the portfolio that I go wrong, for argument's sake, becomes zero, because I made all the mistakes. And the 50% that I've invested correctly becomes 20x, or that 50 becomes 1,000 rupees. The risk of going wrong is limited to 50 rupees. The risk of selling a good company earlier. So if I sell a good company at 300 rupees, 400 rupees, 500 rupees, was much higher than the risk of going wrong. When I realized in my strategy that the risk of going wrong is very limited, allowed me to be concentrated. There is enough data, and I'm sure all the panelists will, talk about their experiences about concentration. But for me, the biggest illuminating light was that the fear of being wrong didn't matter, because my loss was limited to where I go wrong.
Fair point, and I think a very brilliant point maintained. So, 20 rupees allocated to a single company out of 100 rupees can go down to zero. So it's loss of only 20 rupees. But if another 20 rupees grows to 2,000 rupees, obviously upside is unlimited. So, which is a brilliant point. So I carry that point, and now I move on to the second panelist. And the beauty of this panel is that we have 4 different fund managers who have a history of having given 10x kind of returns, but all four of them have totally different philosophy, totally, separate philosophy. And Rahul and Rajesh Kothari, for example, I'm moving on to you, Rajesh. So you have altogether different philosophy. You believe in diversification. Your, philosophy is first protect capital and then create wealth. And in the overall context, right? So concentration is something which I would say you hate. And I would like to understand from you, because you have also given 10x kind of returns over 10 years. How do you manage such a large portfolio? This is a real question. Imagine that an investor has met Rahul and then he meets you. He will ask you this question, right? That now, you have a 40 company portfolio. How would you manage, and why do you need to diversify your portfolio so much? Why can't you have a conviction? Why can't you believe in this mathematical equation, and high conviction thing that Rahul mentioned? Over to you, Rajesh.
Thanks, Kamal, for giving us an opportunity, first of all, and good evening to everyone. We are meeting through Zoom and not personally, so hopes that next year probably we'll able to see you personally. Well, Kamal, my answer to this question is, in my 22 years of experience in capital market, and I think the world is becoming more and more VUCA world. It is becoming volatile, uncertain, ambiguity, and complex. And in that VUCA world, the business cycles are becoming shorter. If you look at the companies globally, there is only probably, according to one research done by the Global University, only 1.5% of the companies globally have survived 100 years. Only 1.98.5% companies have not survived 100 years, correct? So my confidence or conviction, irrespective of how detailed we work, it is as on yesterday. Let me give you one classic example. The Volkswagen Global, number one company, Porsche car family, correct? And one emission norm scan. Do I have an ability to predict Volkswagen? Probably answer is no. So kind of risk what we are taking, whether it is a governance risk, whether it is a technology risk, whether it is a business cycle risk, irrespective of what kind of detailed work or conviction I might have, it may not pan out the way in which I am thinking it will happen. So what we look at, Kamal, is basically the risk-adjusted returns, correct? And in that risk-adjusted return, when you have the 40-50 stocks portfolio, and fortunately India gives that opportunity to have 50 stocks portfolio, because when we look at the total listed companies, about 5,000 plus listed companies, out of that there are roughly 550 companies which makes net profit in excess of 100 crores. And to give you a perspective, to make 100 crores profit, you require roughly 1,500 to 2,000 crores of revenue, and which is definitely a very big benchmark. So you have a choice of 500 companies, you have to select from these 500 companies. And India gives you that opportunity. Then the question is, why not we reduce the risk? Because we know that when we concentrate the portfolio, nothing wrong about it. It is not about one strategy is good or one strategy is not good. It is about the approach. So our approach is, why to take that high risk when you are getting the opportunity to invest in 50, 60 kind of a companies. And every company, important is not to go wrong, as you rightly mentioned, how we manage that, correct? And that's a strong process of identifying, first of all, right companies. So even if one goes wrong, if a company is delivered 100 crores profit, but the business cycle is not in favor, the company is leader. And if the company is leader, even if the stock price may go down, but it will be the first company to bounce back when economic recovery happens, when the industry cycle turns up. And that is something very, very critical. So diversification helps you to reduce the risk. Importantly, ability to predict the three risks: governance, technology, and business cycle is unprecedented in this kind of a VUCA world. Cycles are becoming shorter globally, and therefore it allows us to protect capital, create wealth. That's my short answer to your question.
Right, Rajesh, well said. So I will come back to the risk-adjusted returns in the next round. So now we have another two panelists, Samit and Sunil, who also have a history of having given 10x kind of returns over last 10 years. In fact, if I move on to Samit, his returns for one of the portfolios over last 10 years is more than 30%. It's close to 35% if I have to quote that. But he believes totally into mid and small cap kind of philosophy. So definitely requires a lot of conviction to build a 100% portfolio purely to mid and small cap. And I remember, Samit, having done webinar with you in November 2019, right? So I was going to say 18, 2020 has passed so fast, one forgets, right? So 2019 November, I remember you had projected that now, from here on, the rally is going to be for broader markets. And then, you also mentioned something about cycles, that for broader markets, there is a cycle. And you projected that cycle will be either starting from 2021 or 22 at that point of time. And in that discussion, you also mentioned that if quest of any individual is to make 10x returns in 10 years, then one has to look beyond top 100 companies. And that is what your forte is. So what are the various, types of businesses? Because mid and small cap space is very, very broad, right? So there are many companies beyond 100. It's, there are more than 1,000 companies as a universe. So what are the various business models? What are the various types of companies within mid and small cap that you have a knack for, or that you have a conviction about? And, maybe you could quote some examples, because audience out here would also like to understand from you, in the current context of markets, so that we can gain some knowledge to ultimately get our goal achieved.
Sure. So see, my philosophy is that if you're looking for 10x in 10 years, ideally you need to look for companies which will multiply the earnings 10x in 10 years, right? Because other factors like the valuation and which is not in your hand, because what valuation the company gets depends on the market's mood and the cycle, and there are a lot of other variables which you can't control. What you can analyze in depth is the company, and with the company you can analyze the earnings. I mean, if I look at my history of multi-baggers, I've seen few things which repeat itself, right? So one is, of course, you need to be it's very, very rare that you enter late in the company when the valuations are completely re-rated, the margins are at at the peak level, and you enter the company. It ends up at least the earnings becoming 10x in 10 years. So my examples, like whether it's Bajaj Finance, where the P multiple or the price to book, in 2010 was close to 1 time. Today, that itself is almost 10x, right? So even if the earnings had not gone anywhere, you got 10x just because of the valuation re-rating. You look at other companies like PI Industries. PI Industries P multiple in 2011-12, I remember, was almost in single digit. And today you look at that multiple, it's at least 5 to 6x of that, right? And over and above that, I mean, of course, with your skill, if you're able to find earnings which give you those kind of earnings growth of 10x in 10 years, then you have not just 10x, but much more. Because see, when you invest in portfolio, my portfolio is not as concentrated, say, as Rahul, or not as diverse as what Rajesh said. I invest in maybe 14, 15 stocks. Out of the 14, 15, you will probably get 3 or 4 of these multi-baggers. It's not possible that all of the 15x would become multi-baggers. So if you are looking for 10x in 10 years kind of a portfolio, you need to find 20, 30, 40, 50x multi-baggers in your portfolio, because a lot of them will not work out for you, whatever you do. So see, I mean, I really do not have any specific factor to analyze a business model. I'm open to any business model. The only reason I don't find anything in the large cap, which is the top 100 stocks, is because their base is pretty high. It's almost impossible, because of the size that they have, that their earnings will go 10x in 10 years, right? And I don't really want to bet on valuation getting re-rated, because that's pure luck. So that's the reason I end up getting stocks which are in the mid and small cap companies. The business models can be varied. Because of my experience, my experience has been, I'm an engineer, so I worked in PwC advising a lot of manufacturing companies. So I understand the business models of manufacturing companies. So that's where my multi-baggers have been a lot into B2B kind of a businesses. So whether it's PI Industries or Amara Raja Batteries, some consumers like Lao Pala and Sera kind of companies, or Balkrishna Industries. Those are mostly manufacturing oriented company where that's my expertise, and I understand those businesses much better, and I need to stick with what I understand the best. I have not much idea about technology companies where there are 1,000 baggers out there, but that's not my set of expertise. I would probably need to spend a few years to build those kind of expertise. And hence, I'm completely open to any kind of a business model where I understand that business model, where I can, understand the strategy of the business. The most important thing that I look for when I invest in any company is that company the best in that industry, and does it have capability to take away market share from rest of the competition? Because to grow 10x in 10 years, most of the companies can't do it unless just based on the industry growth. It has to happen by taking away market share, right? So that's where I spend a lot of time, that what are the competitive advantage that a company has, which will enable them to take away the market share. And you analyze at a point in time, right? Things keep on changing. As Rajesh said, the cycles have shrunk, companies evolve, there are so many disruptions happening. So at every point in time when you hold that company, you need to keep on thinking whether that 10x in 10 years or 2x in 3 years is that possible. And if it's possible, I keep on thinking about a 3-year kind of a cycle. I don't know 10x. I don't really know what's going to happen 10 years down the line. I don't have that ability. I just keep on thinking it's a moving ball. I keep on evaluating that ball every point in time. And if the next 2 to 3 years look good, I keep on holding that company. If the valuation is fair, I keep on holding that company. So that's how I invest in those companies.
Right, Samit. So now moving on to Sunil. So this is the most difficult philosophy, I think, which is followed by Sunil. Sunil also has heritage of having given more than 10x kind of return over last 10 years. He has a brilliant track record of having managed Reliance Growth Fund. All of us know that. And let me tell you, while other panelists that we have are proponents of doing kind of growth investing at any price or growth investing at a reasonable price, and Sunil, as far as I understand, has a very, very difficult knack of doing value investing. And why I say it is difficult, because when it comes to investing with a growth philosophy or a growth philosophy at reasonable price, one out of three variables, which is valuations, earnings, and revenue. Out of these three variables, almost three variables are known, because one is going for those companies which have a history, which have a track record. But when it comes to value investing, all these three variables are not known. You have to identify those businesses which have, yes, low valuation, but their earnings and their revenue is to be projected, and that requires a knack. That is why I say it requires a knack. And maybe last 3-4 years were more about growth at any price, and we have seen recently growth at reasonable price also now participating. But now because valuations are very high, if one is able to actually do a very good value investing at these levels, I think that is the most comforting portfolio from investors' perspective. So over to Sunil, we would like to understand from you, what is it that you see, when you kind of catch a company from the perspective of that value ideology, when you do not have all the variables in front of you.
Thank you for having me here, and nice to be a part of this interesting panel, and have heard great views before I got to speak. So first of all, just to clarify, value without any growth has no meaning and no returns. So I'll just clarify that though I get a little bit I would say concentrate a little bit on valuations. Ultimately, a company, when you are investing, you are becoming a part of the business, or you're becoming a partner in the business. And unless the business grows, which is measured by revenue growth, profit growth, and so on and so forth, big returns will not be made. At the same time, we have to understand, this concept of quality at any price and buy, or buy at any price, which is a Bach concept, which has got very popular last 5-6 years. History has shown that it does not work forever, and there are reasons for it. One is, if you are investing in a company which is at 70-80 P multiple, and the growth rates are only 10-12%, and if you intend to make 10x returns out of it, you imagine, you have to make 26% returns out of a company whose profit is growing 10-12%. You do a mathematical calculation, the PE of that company after 10 years would have to be 500 for you to make 10x returns. And I don't think that is possible even for companies like Tesla over a period of time. One of it is possible. So we have to understand this very, very clearly. It's very easy to say that last 5 years we have made money, so in the next 5 years also we'll make money. Last 5 years have been very different. Economy was not participating, and these companies got undue, I would say, flows. And I would say 50% of all returns which have been made in these companies were due to concentrated investors buying their own shares and jacking up the prices rather than fundamentals being up there. I think in the traditional form of investing, as I said, when you are investing, we are becoming partners in the company. And I think when you are investing, very clearly what you have to see is whether the business over the next 5-10 years is going to grow. And in some way, I would agree with Samit that all your investments have to be focused on whether the profit growth is going to give you returns. I think if there is a P re-rating, it's a bonus. But ultimately, it's a profit growth which is going to give you returns. Interesting thing, what happens is that as there is consistency of profit growth, the PE multiples also increase. So in an economy which is growing at 6-7% real and 10% nominal, for you to find a company which is going to grow at 26% profit for the next 10 years is close to impossible. I think we'll have to find a company where profit growth can be sustainably at 15% and the P ratio is, sub 8-10 and which can become 20. And that is the only way you can make a 10x kind of a return. And I think that is what we focus on. The only thing I would like to say is that, I consider myself to be a very open investor. I don't have any barriers that I will not invest in a bank, I would not invest in a commodity, I would not invest in this, and I would not invest in that. I think the investor is giving us, the money to invest, and we have to ensure that we invest it in a manner where the volatility is reduced, and we do justice in terms of what the future can be. And I think to that extent, I will give you some examples. The largest paint company, the total profit they have made in the last 10 years put together is lower than the profit made by one steel company in 1 year. And we can argue that, this is a very consistent profit and the other company has very volatile profit, but all said and done, even if you look at all the volatility, this is the case. The dividends given by a commodity company is much higher than the largest FMCG company's dividend. And you can check that out again. 1 year back, we wrote an article on bubble in quality. The top 2 FMCG companies' market cap was more than all the steel, metal, mining, cement, building material companies put together. And the 2 companies' market cap has remained the same. The other segment has grown 3x in terms of profit. So I think it is very difficult now to say I will buy these companies for 10 years. This is the world of disruption. Cycles are getting shorter. Cycles are getting very, very, I would say, volatile. And in that kind of a situation, the only thing which we worry about is whether there is consistent profit growth over a cycle which is possible, and whether there is discipline as far as return on equity is concerned. I think if the profit growth is more than 15% and the return on equity is more than 15%, irrespective of the sectors, we would be very open to looking at it.
Right. So you have, answered the first part of the question, which is why value investing. But maybe, quickly you can also cover how value investing, how do you identify a company when, you have only one variable known to you, which is low price, which is known to everybody else. But what is your lens to see that?
So again, I would not say that we only look at low price. In fact, some of my biggest gains in the last 1 year are investing in some really high tech growth companies, including CPaaS companies. So we are very open. We are not averse to giving a 30 PE to a stock which grows at 40% per annum. We can't give a 50 PE to a stock which grows at 10%. So that is one very clear, clarification I would like to give you. So as far as companies are concerned, suddenly debt and capex had become a bad word last 5-6 years, because incremental capex was not yielding the desired returns, and debt in India was very expensive. I would say that debt at a reasonable price and given a reasonable return on it should be the best thing. Because, unless you have some kind of a debt, your return on equity cannot exceed beyond a particular percentage. So I think when we look at companies, we have this framework which we call the MEETS framework, where management is definitely there, but our definition of management is free cash flows and incremental return on equity. We come to the earnings part. We look at companies where earnings can double in 4 to 5 years. Then we come to the events and disruption part, and I think Rajesh touched upon it. I think this is a world of disruption. A newspaper company 5 years back would have been a 10-year multi-bagger because of the huge stickiness and steady profit growth. But now it is out of business because you have the Twitters of the world which give you news instantly. Or even a traditional passenger vehicle manufacturer, I will not touch it, because Tesla has shown that the world can change very rapidly. And I was speaking to someone today and they were talking about how this electric two-wheelers have just got fancy. Suddenly everyone would want to go that way, and there are new brands which are coming in. So I think this disruption is the order of the day. You cannot buy anything blindly and say that this is here for 10 years. The fourth is timing. Yes, it is difficult to time the market, but if you have done your homework properly, I think volatility, again, Rajesh touched upon, volatility is here to stay. In a year, 2 times, you get opportunities where the markets correct by 15 to 20%. I'm not talking about stocks, but the markets on an annual basis correct by 15 to 20% every year. And stocks correct 30, 40%. So if you have done your work properly, you don't need to chase stocks. You will get your opportunity. And the fifth part is the structural part, which I would say that I would wear the hat of a growth investor rather than a value investor. So where there is structural growth opportunity, where the growth rates are visibly at 30, 40%, you will not get stocks at 10, 12p. There you will have to give a premium. So I think this is the framework which we follow.
Right. Thank you so much, Sunil. Quite insightful. So, we have covered first part of this discussion about, yeah, Rahul wants to say something. Please.
Yeah. Kamal, from hearing everybody, what I'd like to say is what is common across all these great investors is their ability to remove behavioral biases, whether it is uncertainty, whether it is anchoring, whether it is recency. Everybody has developed a style which removes behavioral biases. And really the difference between all great investors is the fact that their styles emulate removal of all biases. So if I were part of your audience, one point I'd like to make is that removal of behavioral biases, and there are multiple styles to remove it, will enable you to reach a 10x portfolio return in the current environment, given where India is. That's my limited point. Thanks.
Sure. So, Rahul, to that, another real question comes to my mind. Again, it's absolutely a real question. So, you raised a very brilliant point on the behavioral bias. Let's talk about your philosophy, right? So we have all heard about a roller coaster ride, right? A roller coaster ride for a few seconds is fun, but if one gets into a roller coaster ride for say 1 hour, it's very, very, it will be a nightmare. But when it comes to, from investors' perspective, investing into a portfolio which has say 5 or 6 companies, yours is a concentrated portfolio. Obviously, if one is able to sustain that roller coaster ride of a 5-6 companies over a 10-year period, one makes a lot of money. But from the perspective of a behavioral bias, where one sees things like recently happened with Bajaj Finance, one of the stocks that you like, right? That stock corrects from 4,000 to 2,000 again back to 4,000. But during this behavioral bias, when there is a lot of noise, and when the portfolio has 20% allocation to that single stock, and when the period required to actually build 10x return is 10 years, and in that 10-year period, such events keep happening, what are your points of wisdom that you would like to share with those investors to tackle that part of behavioral bias in that roller coaster ride?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the way we handled it was in terms of understanding where our thought process went. So what every businessman thinks today, he will see it in his balance sheet and P&L 2 years later. So balance sheet and P&L are outcome of thinking. For example, you build the PMS AIF world and where we are talking about, but this is an outcome of your thinking that started 2 years ago. And an outcome of P&L and balance sheet is the stock market price, plus fear and greed. So I said that I can't apply logic to emotion. I can only apply logic to logic. On a lighter note, I've been married for 20 years, 25 years now. I've never been able to apply logic to emotion. So I said, I won't even want to try and do that in the markets. The only place where I can apply logic to is exactly what the other esteemed panelists said, is there is a certain style to look at earnings. There is a certain style to look at growth, which is logical in nature. So we said that we will only apply logic to seeing whether the company's profits are growing or not, or more than profits, whether volume growth is there, is it debt free. Once we have those parameters, then we know that the stock market price will reflect reality at some point in time. And that is how we built it. So we never looked at the stock market price. We always looked whether the company can deliver volume growth. Even during Corona, we looked at what will be the volume growth. How will our companies or leadership thinking about it? And that is what gave us the confidence to be able to stay invested. But I have seen worse periods than what Corona was. And while Samit talked about Cera, the time I invested in Cera, within a few months, the promoter's only 28-year-old son passed away. And the objective was to stay. That's a 9 Sigma event. That's 3 Sigma from Corona. And to be able to do that and continue to hold on after this event tells us that at some point in time, we are eliminating behavioral biases. So applying logic to logic at a certain theme with the blinders, with the safeguards is what allows us to stay invested. And then time in the market versus timing the market makes sense.
Right. Thank you. So, from here on, I would like to ask a question from Rajesh, back to Rajesh, right? So we have such eminent speakers. It is important to definitely cover some of the projections for next decade, because that is very important for one to build a 10x portfolio in 10 years. We have talked about philosophy. We have talked about identification of businesses, right businesses, and there are various styles of doing that. We have also talked about second important factor, which is behavioral bias, which is another factor which is important for an investor to manage during the journey for 10x returns in 10 years. The third important factor is identifying maybe right sectors, and that I would like to ask from Rajesh Kothari, right? So you have a 3M approach that you apply. If you were to apply a 3M approach now and were to kind of project what will be the mix of Nifty in terms of sector allocation, say after 5 years, or how will this mix change over next 10 years? Because this projection, this identification is also very important to build a 10x kind of a portfolio for 10 years. Over to you, Rajesh.
Sure. So Kamal, just taking my point where I left, and I think your question is absolutely connecting to that point. So what is 3M approach? Market size, market share, and margin of safety. Of course, with the fencing of right management, right balance sheet, and right governance. So market size is size of opportunity. Bigger the opportunity, better it is. Market share, we basically buy the company which is top 5 in its own sector. And margin of safety is valuation, right valuation for right growth. Now, when you say that, from here on, if you want to make 10x, and what kind of sectors which will evolve over a period of time, to be very frank, we do not spend much time on the, predicting what the Nifty will be, because it has nothing to do with my performance, irrespective of what Nifty will be 10 years down the line. While one can put a, I can give a long thesis that in my view, how the Nifty will look like 10 years down the line. but actually does it make any change to my portfolio? Answer is no, because anyway that is basically getting captured in my stock identification and my top-down approach. So where I left was 500 companies, 100 crores plus profit. That means 1,500 crores plus revenue. Now, if you apply this approach to the 3M, that whether company's ability to grow, whether the company can grow faster than the underlying economy growth and the underlying, the sector growth. And most importantly, as I said, the sector in which company is operating, the market share of it. So every sector goes through up and downturn. There is not a single sector which will not go through the cycles, correct? But if the company is leader, then it will gain market share in both the ways, downturn and as well as upturn. Let me give you a classic example. Say real estate sector, which has suffered the most in last probably 6 years. But in the last 6 years, it is Godrej of the world which gained market share in Mumbai. It is a Prestige of the world which gained market share in Bangalore. So in downturn of the cycle, they gain more market share. Now think of it, what will happen when the cycle turns up? It can actually gain more and more market share. So by doing that consistently, their revenue growth and earnings growth will be higher than underlying sector and or also the underlying economy. And that itself means that company will become large market cap, and therefore at some point of time, it may become part of BSE 100 index or BSE 500. Let me give you one example of one company globally, and we are holding the subsidiary of that company. Please put a disclaimer. The stocks which I'm talking, we might be holding for our PMS and our personal capacity, like Honeywell Automation. That company has been now included in the Dow Jones Index. The company has done extremely well in last 10, 20, 30 years. It is a company known for innovation. Now, if the same company do similar trend in India for next 10 years, can Honeywell be part of Nifty? Maybe yes, maybe no. But if the company keep doing that consistently with a superior free cash flow, and that is something very, very important, because what happens every time everybody talks about growth from the common investor perspective as well, but you need to look at also the underlying balance sheet. So when we are doing the valuation, and that's one important point which I wanted to highlight you, it is not only about the growth, but what is the underlying free cash flow. And if the higher the free cash flow, higher will be the valuation, whether we like it or not, correct? And that is something very, very important, detailed work which one needs to do when one is identifying the sector. Now, during economy recovery period, we believe that cyclical sectors will do better than the defensive sector. It means capital goods, it means banking and finance, it means cement, it means to some extent auto and auto ancillary, and very importantly, the capex story, irrespective of Indian economy recovery because of China plus one, and there is specialty chemical and to some extent pharmaceuticals, and of course the IT sector on the services side. These are the sectors which we believe is going to grow higher in the first round of economic cycle, because consumption is a laggard indicator. That will also do well, but after 3 years. So this is the first round of cycle. We believe these are the sectors which will outperform the overall market indices from 3 years perspective.
Right. Thanks, Rajesh. So you made a very brilliant point on the free cash flow. So the more the free cash flow, the higher the valuations. Now, this makes me ask this question from Samit. In today's market, this is a very popular statement that because all the companies, like Sunil also mentioned, quoting one of the paint companies, that where there is high free cash flow, valuations are very high, and that there are, in today's, I would say, time, we call them as maybe consistent compounders. Everybody has learned them, calling them as consistent compounders. Is there any evidence in the history, Samit, this question is for you, right, that the companies which have high valuations because of free cash flow, or because of the perception, or because they have a moat, or because of they are a monopoly in that industry, but is there any evidence in the industry, in the market, in the world market, in any other economy also, that that there is a different thesis, there is a different philosophy altogether that comes when economy grows, and some of these companies which are seen and accepted at high valuations, they see PE contraction, and there is a time for 3, 4, 5 years that market doesn't like them, and these darlings of the markets are kind of they become boring companies. Can that happen in Indian context? Has that ever happened in any economy in the past? It is important to understand at this point of time, because valuations of these companies is definitely higher. Theoretically, they are very high, but there are a lot of logics like free cash flow, ROCE, right? A lot of these logics are given. Over to you, Samit. Sorry.
Sure. No, I mean, see, if you look at the history, just look at last couple of decades, right? The first decade, which was 2000 to 2010, and look at the valuations of almost all of these companies, whether it's HUL or Nestle and Asian Paints and Marico, they were generally in the 20s, somewhere even in teens, right? And that lasted for almost 10 years. Right? So what changed was in 2011. That's where the P multiple started rising, and it's all about where is the best growth available, right? After during the first 7 years in 2000, like especially 2003 and 2007, there were so many growth opportunities available that for investors it didn't make sense to go with companies which are growing at 15% or 12% kind of rate. There were companies which were doubling their earnings in 2 years or 3 years, so it made sense to migrate towards them. What happened in 2011-12 was that the economy just suddenly slowed down, and even now today, if you look at last sort of 10 years of this decade, all the these consistent compounders, they continued growing at that 11-10% kind of annualized earnings growth, and that was way different than the rest of the universe, which was growing at barely 5-6%, especially the cyclical companies. And because of non-availability of too many growth options, investors all concentrated towards these kind of companies, and that gave them such a valuation. I mean, if you look at the valuations today, they are 3x of the average of last decade, right? So almost 3x in 10 years, almost 11.5% per year kind of returns incremental you got from that. In addition to that, 10-11% of earnings growth. So you made 20 to 23% kind of returns on an average, which were way superior to Nifty doing 10-11% CAGR during that time. And if you exclude the top quality companies and look at the remainder of the Nifty companies, they'd probably deliver not even 5% kind of returns. There's a huge gap between that 5% and that 22%. So naturally, you would tend to give them more and more multiple, and there is no limit to it when everyone wants to get into it. Right now, question is whether the options will widen. If in the next 4 years, if the options widen, that you get companies which will grow at 20-25% per year, I'm pretty sure that many investors will get FOMO, will get greed, and they will want to get out of those. It's all about incrementally what happens. Those investors will want to get out of those kind of companies and get into wherever the growth is available. And if the growth is available at 1/10 the price or 1/3 the price, why wouldn't you get into that? So I think it's but natural that it would happen. This history of really high multiple is very, very short. It's barely 7-8 years of history. It never existed before. And in a market, 7-8 years is just one cycle, and we are talking of a very, very long period of history of stock market. So I feel it is going to happen, because whatever kind of market there is, a lot of these consistent compounder, they will not have much of volatility in their growth rate. It will range from that 6-7% to maybe 12-13%. It will never be like 0%, or it will never be 20 or 25%. Whereas in a good economic cycle, there will be many opportunities where you will easily get 15, 20, 25% kind of returns, and naturally you have to move towards them.
Right. So this is the last question. Yeah, please, Rajesh.
Just to add, not only in international market, but in India itself, if you look at from 1999 to 2003 or 98 to 2004, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the largest Indian multinational FMCG company delivered 0% CAGR when it comes to stock price. So it has happened in India, the PE contraction. If the earnings growth is lesser than the available opportunities.
Sure. So we have two more questions to be asked, one from Sunil and one from Rahul. And Aishwarya, I would like to, just tell you that I'll take maybe 5 minutes extra for this session, right? So Rahul, Sunil, the question for you. So, you have worked in a mutual fund asset management company for 25 years. And now you have started over the last 2 years an alternative investment fund, right? So, and of late, what has happened, the learning is that the possibility of 10x returns is definitely not there in a mutual fund structure over 10-year period. We have not seen that. And over last 2-3 years, the returns of mutual fund as a structure has actually fallen. It's not in line with what it used to be in the past. So what is it that mutual fund guys are missing, that they are unable to even beat index? And what is the difference in the approach of a mutual fund company when it comes to investing into equity investments versus an alternative investment fund? And why is it that one finds it very difficult to get such kind of a return in a mutual fund?
So frankly, there are quite a few mutual funds who are doing very good work even now. So I think to make a generalized statement will not be fair to the industry. Mutual fund as a product is a very efficient product. It has a lot of benefits of taxation. So we cannot say that it's not a good instrument. I think the only difference is in a PMS and an AIF structure. For example, we have lock-ins. We know that the money is available for investments over a period of time without being at a risk of being monitored on a day-to-day basis or being withdrawn. Also, the investors typically are mature investors vis-a-vis a mutual fund where investments from 1,000 rupees to 100 crores come in the same scheme. I think that's another advantage. I think the third thing is very clearly, I think mutual fund is now becoming more a deployment kind of a strategy where the only thing you have to do is try and beat the benchmark and try and beat your peers. Whereas, when we are looking at an AIF or a PMS structure, I think the idea is to maximize returns, taking into account the risk reward, which you have communicated and your own philosophy points out to. So there are advantages and disadvantages, but I think to make a generalized statement that PMS and AIF will do better than all the mutual funds would not be fair. I think there would be mutual funds who would do very, very well, and there would be AIF and PMSs who would have their challenging times. Just to touch upon the previous question which you asked, Samit, I think you have to just see the Nifty 50, which was there in US in 70s. I think those companies did not give any return for 30 years. Even in India, Hindustan Lever did not give any return for 10 years. The same thing can be said about ITC, which was considered to be a blue chip. It has given you 0 returns over the last 6-7 years. So I think there have been multiple examples of companies not giving returns. And there would be multiple examples of companies not giving any returns, howsoever good the quality would be for the next 5-10 years. I just wanted to clarify that.
Sure. So I am a big fan of mutual funds. There is no generalized statement, but yes, though the fact is the last 2-year returns have been low. So that's why I wanted
and one more thing, this, obviously Rahul has done phenomenally well, and congratulations to the good work. I think all of us doing well is good for the industry because it brings investors into the equity markets, which is more necessary right now rather than money going to Rajesh or me or anyone else. We are underinvested as India in equities, and I think all of us are doing obviously for ourselves selfish interest, but also the investors are making good returns out of it. I think the only thing is, if you are able to communicate to your investors that this is going to be my style and this is going to be my philosophy, every philosophy will work and will have challenges from time to time. I think the core is that you communicate to your investors properly. Maybe Rahul buys 5 companies and all 5 do well. And it is possible that in a couple of years time frame, maybe 2 or 3 don't do well. But if the communication to the investor is very clear, I think the investors will have much more confidence. And I think that is where different philosophies work if the communication to the investors is proper.
Right. Thank you. I take that point. Investor communication is the most important factor which actually manages the investor's emotion, especially during bad times. And that is what, we at PMSIF World also believe, and we have done that brilliantly well. And now we come to the last question for Rahul. Rahul, it is very, very important to also understand the macro fundamentals. If macro doesn't support, whatever be the philosophy, whatever be the business, whatever be the sector selection, aiming for 10x returns may be possible, but to achieve that, macro is definitely required. And all of us now in this new decade, starting from 2021, 2030, believe that India will touch 5 trillion GDP number. What are your views, Rahul, in this regards? What is your projection? What are the factors that make you believe in whatever answer you convey?
So let's start with three things. Okay. The first thing is that right from 2008, there has been quantitative easing. Every single bank has and except for India for multiple reasons. But here's the main reason why in India the central bank has not pumped money. You've heard about the US pumping about trillions of dollars, right? Kamal?
Absolutely, yes.
Kamal, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Now think about this. Yeah. So think about this, right? Let me ask you a question. If a 27-year-old guy gets 101 fever, how worried are you?
Not too much.
And if a 67-year-old guy gets fever, how worried are you?
Absolutely, yeah. Too much worry.
So economically, in terms of age, US, Japan are like 67-year-olds. And while coronavirus is the same across the world, economically they're far more worried than we in India are. When you're worried at a 67-year-old in terms of medically, you have lots of facilities that you invest in. So that is why there is a huge amount of quantitative easing that comes to the US. And we in India at a 23-year-old, our average age is in the mid 20s. We are going to get a lot of benefit of this money coming into India. The second part is that within India, our GDP per capita is $2,300, around that, which means that roti, kapda, and makan still is driving India's GDP growth. After 7/11, the Bombay blast, the next day the trains were working. India cannot afford to sit at home in any way because we are at $2,300 GDP per capita. Because we can't afford to sit at home, any external environment that comes in, we will go to work the next day as a country. And this is what drives GDP growth. Aspirations of people because of media spread all over, because of the cell phone, drives GDP growth. And the third thing is, Kamal, if you look at the number of Indian CEOs in Fortune 100 companies in the US, you'll find a lot of them, the Satya Nadellas, the Sundar Pichais, etc., etc. I think the next decade of Indian CEOs, like a Rajiv Jain or a Neville Narona, will drive a lot of companies to tremendous heights. I think the next decade belongs to business models, because today there is no sector that Apple, Google, Tesla can't address. The boundaries of what they can do from a driverless car, Apple getting into driverless cars, every segment is available to everybody in terms of products, as long as they can capture consumer wallet share. Hence, I think it will be leaders that drive the next decade. And I think Indian leaders, especially from middle towns or small towns that are very hungry, are going to drive India's large companies. So Nifty, you will see, will be made up of CEOs that come from smaller towns, brilliant in their understanding of India, and continue to go forward. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Rahul. So, we are already exceeding time by 3 minutes. I think, there are many more questions that are there in my mind, especially for Sunil and for Samit as well as Rajesh, which I cannot ask. So we'll have to do a maybe second series of this, and we'll definitely do that maybe over next 3-4 months. With these words, I would like to, kind of give you good wishes for the decade ahead. And I will again get back to you, and we'll again do a similar session to continue it from here. All the very best to you. Thank you very much. Over to you, Aishwarya.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Manocha, for steering that conversation. That was really, really bringing the best out of each speaker and the luminaries that they are. You were truly right. We were truly left enriched with all of their viewpoints. So thank you to the eminent panelists as well. And thank you for wishing us well, Mr. Manocha, to all of us, to all the viewers as well. And with that, we will now go on to the next panel, which is themed philosophy-based versus quant-based asset management for alpha generation over the next decade. And the session is going to be moderated by Mr. Ratish Pandey. Besides that, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you very quickly that we will be graced by our eminent panelists, Mr. Anand Sharma. We will have Mr. Karthik Kumar with us and Mr. Amit Jeswani. So I'm going to see you on the other side of this 2-minute break only.